Well, it's good to be with you all. I have been praying for you. I am in charge of employee wellness. If I walk around, is that going to be a problem? Okay. I'm in charge of employee wellness at Pennsylvania Conference, amongst a few other things. And one of our challenges for September, my job, I come up with 2 challenges a month. And if our employees, pastors, teachers, office staff, complete the challenge for the month, then they get $50 cash. And if their spouse is on our insurance and they complete the challenge, they get $50 cash. It's a nice way to offset the cost of insurance, and we found that our employee wellness costs have gone down as a result. In fact, we are well below the NAD average for employee health care costs. But one of our wellness challenges this month was to fast and pray. It's something that I like to include in my life a lot. And usually I will fast from something like chocolate. My husband often says, "You can go." I went one time 9 months without chocolate. I was fasting for my oldest son who was going through some stuff. And I went 9 months without chocolate. And my husband's like, "If you can go that long without chocolate, why do you ever eat again? Why do you ever start eating it again?" I said, "Well, I have to have something to fast from." And so, because I always want to fast from something that I know is a part of my life or that I crave or that I want. But this month, I chose to fast from something different because the wellness challenge, I didn't say that it had to be food. And so I have been fasting from the radio in my car. And I heard someone say, "Wow, I have a long commute. I drive 50 minutes to the office when I'm going to the office. And a lot of days, being a conference worker, I'm not even going to the office. I'm going to different parts of the state. Just last Sabbath, I was preaching in Reading. Pennsylvania, that's kind of up here. And then I had to drive over to Philadelphia over here, about an hour away, to spend the afternoon as we had our Faith for Family in Philly event. And we had more than 1,100 people go out on the streets of Philadelphia and Reading, door to door, sharing the gospel of Christ last weekend, and we were really excited about that. But as I've been driving in my car, I have to admit, the first week, I probably just ranted and raved a lot to God about stuff in my personal life. It's been a really tough summer this summer. But then I started realizing I needed to be more focused, and so I've been praying for you. I've been praying that God would guide. Even today, as I made my way here from Paradise, I live in Paradise, Pennsylvania, I prayed for you all along. And just praying that God would protect and guide you here. I was praying yesterday. I know what happens right before retreat. I know what happens. Life gets hard, doesn't it? You fight with your husband, you yell at your kids, you can't find anything that you want to wear because, let's face it, we walk in the room, there's all these women, we're instantly comparing ourselves, instantly feeling inadequate and unworthy. And we stress about it, and I was thinking about it yesterday. What do I take? What do I wear? What's the weather going to be like? Lou texted me to let me know what the weather was going to be like, and I didn't know it was going to rain as hard as it did today, so I wasn't prepared for that. It's 80-something in Paradise, sunshiny, blue skies, no humidity right now. It's truly paradise right now. But anyway, I've been praying for you that those things won't get in the way, that you will find a moment at some point this weekend when you will know beyond a shadow of a doubt that God showed up for you, specifically you. A song, something that's said, a seminar, a hug from a friend, a prayer, whatever. God knows what it's going to take, that you feel like this weekend was planned just for you. Because, see, He loves you. He loves you so much that He's got it here for you this weekend. There's going to be something that you're going to experience, and you're going to go, "How did that speaker know? How did that person that was praying for me know?" I want you to look for those moments because I've been praying for them, and I have a team of faithful friends at home praying too, and praying for you as well. And then I have a favor to ask. Because here's a little secret about me. I am an introvert. Yeah, people are like, oh yeah, how can she be an introvert when she travels all over the country speaking? Up here is fine. I am so excited about the message I'm going to share with you that I love doing this. I am so excited to share God's word with you. When Gail contacted me about coming and saying that they were looking at the passage of Scripture in Mark 2, I was excited because I love that story, and I was excited to share it and how God was going to lead with it. So this part is great. It's walking in that door and finding a place to sit. It's coming to breakfast tomorrow morning, and you guys have been talking all night long. And I've been sleeping, or trying to, all by myself. And I do not mind being all by myself because I'm an introvert, and so I like that quiet time. I was telling somebody out at the registration, my husband has been unemployed for 7 years. After working at his job for 30 years, they did away with his department. And so I never get the house to myself. Ever. I know. It's horrible. We were comparing notes outside. One of the ladies outside has experienced something similar. And so I don't mind quiet at all by myself, but could you befriend me this weekend? Could you invite me to sit with you? Could you, if I look like I'm going to wander off and not participate in something, grab me? And if you do, see, I always bribe the crowd. I've got these little beautiful promise cards, and you can pull one, and I've been praying over them that God would just get them to the right people, okay? And so now we're going to get to God's Word, and I'm excited, and we're going to start in Mark 2. Mark 2 is going to be the main scripture we're going to start in. Most of the 3 sessions, actually the 1 session we're going to end there, but we're going to start there and end there, and then we're going to go other places. And so Mark 2, and when I'm reading scripture, I'm going to be reading from the New King James Version. And so Mark 2, and again Jesus, entered Capernaum after some days. And so you have to kind of look to see where he was. Well, he had been in the previous chapter, he'd gone out, and he'd healed the leper, and he told him, don't tell anybody. But you know what? When Jesus heals you, when Jesus transforms your life, when he brings healing into your life, how can you not tell somebody? When you experience God, you can't help but tell somebody. The reason we're not telling about Jesus to people, the reason we're not telling people about Jesus is because we haven't experienced him. Not in a life-transforming way. Because if we had, we'd be telling people. And so Jesus told them, don't go and tell anybody. Shh, mum's the word. And what did he do? He went out and told everybody that he possibly could, and that made it impossible for Jesus to move around. And so Jesus had gone to the deserted places, and they still came and found him. Why? Why did they all want to be with Jesus? They wanted healing. They wanted to be around him. Why? How did they know? Because somebody had told them. And somebody had told them what they had experienced. You see, ladies, it's what you've experienced with Jesus. It's your testimony that will draw people to him. The way that he's been there for you, the way that he's healed you from whatever you've gone through. Divorce, abuse, the loss of a child, miscarriage. Whatever it is that you've been through, as you share how Jesus met you and how he transformed those moments, that will be what draws people. And so Jesus couldn't get around in the city. And so, again, he'd entered Capernaum after some days, and it was heard that he was in the house. Now, many theologians believe that because of where they were, that this was Peter's house. And so Peter would have been on the road with Jesus. I always like to think about these things. He would have been on the road traveling with Jesus, and then one day he shows up at home. Hey, honey, I'm home. Oh, and I brought all the guys with me. And we know that it wasn't just a dozen men that traveled with Jesus. There was a whole crowd of people that traveled with Jesus. And then what happens in our story? They come from everywhere. And it was heard that he was in the house. Immediately, many gathered together so that there was no longer room to receive them, not even near the door. People came from everywhere. And the Gospel of Luke says that they came from Galilee, Judea, and Jerusalem. And Luke adds one more tidbit. Because he says, and the Spirit of the Lord was present to heal them. God was ready to show up. But as we read the story, we only see one person who was healed. And it makes you kind of wonder, why only one, if the Spirit of the Lord was present to heal? And he preached the word to them. I read that. I put a little note on my iPad next to the word preach because it suddenly caught me that we don't know what he preached about. No one recorded the sermon. No one live streamed the sermon out to other people. And as a person, as a speaker, that bothers me just a little bit because I realized that it wasn't the sermon that people walked away remembering. It was what they saw happen next. Because sometimes it's not always the sermons and the words that we say. It's what they experience. What do people experience with God and not just the words? Then they came to him, Jesus, bringing a paralytic who was carried by 4 men. Have you ever wondered who these 4 men were? Have you ever thought, who were these 4 guys? A lot of times we say that his 4 friends carried him. But let's think about the paralytic for a moment. We're going to look at him a little bit more tomorrow. I want to focus on the friends today. But think about the paralytic. What would it have been like for him to live in Bible times? What would people have thought about him? Would people have wanted to have been around him? Why not? People would have believed that because he was a paralytic, that God had cursed him. That he was such a sinner that God had cursed him. Because when good things happen to you, God blesses you. And when bad things happen to you, God has cursed you. And so you must be an awful, sinful person. And so maybe his family and friends stayed with him in the beginning. And his paralysis wasn't for forever. It had happened. And we're led to believe that maybe it happened because of sin. And so as other people didn't want any part of him because they thought that he was a horrible, awful person, the enemy probably spoke in his head telling him that that was true about him. And eventually, even his family and friends probably walked away from him. And his life would have been contained on the mat that he laid in. And he would lay on that mat, unable to move. How did he make a living? How did he get food? Begging. How did he get where he was begging? He would have to get people to move him. He would have to ask people to. Once he begged and got money, how would he get food? He'd have to get somebody to go get it for them. Do you think that was possible? There were times when he'd give his money to somebody to go get food for him and they never came back? Do you think that sometimes people cheated and took advantage? Have you ever thought of what it would be like? Because what about when it was cold? What about when it rained, like it rained today?
Well, he was a paralytic, so depending on what part of the paralysis, he might not be able to feel it.
He might not, but he's still getting soaking wet. He's still out there in the elements. I even think about things about, how did he go to the bathroom? Did he ever shower? Okay, maybe they didn't shower back then. Maybe they had baths, but did he ever get clean? And so who were these 4 men? What made them on their way to see Jesus pick him up and carry him there. And that's not just what they did. These 4 men brought him to Jesus, and when they could not come near him because of the crowd, they get to the house, they're carrying him, and we'll talk about some of that tomorrow, but when they got him there and they get all the way to the house, the crowd is so great that they can't even get near the door. And now they have a choice to make. Do we go, good try, we tried to get you there, but look, there's nobody getting near Jesus today, so we'll see you later. We'll leave him there or take him home or whatever. That was one choice. The other choice was to not give up and to do whatever it took to get him to Jesus. This is where I think about Peter's wife. Because Peter's been on the road and all of a sudden he shows up with all these people, and then all these other people crowd in and she can't even talk to her husband because there's people everywhere, and then all of a sudden they're sitting there and all of a sudden the roof starts jiggling a little bit, pieces start falling down, and all of a sudden there's a hole in her ceiling. And when the story is over, Peter's going to hit the road with Jesus again, leaving this hole in the ceiling. I think about these things. Have you ever thought about these things? So they uncovered the roof where Jesus was, and when they had broken through, they let down the bed on which the paralytic was lying. I often think about this too. This is just kind of weird, but how did they let him down? He couldn't feel anything, so they could have just said, "Watch out below," you know? I mean, how do you get him through the roof to the ground where Jesus was? The place was crowded. There were people. I'm thinking that once the hay and the straw started moving up there, people started looking up and they weren't listening to Jesus anymore. I know what that is to be a preacher when everybody is thinking about something else. I spoke in a church in Pennsylvania one time that had 8 people. That was the congregation, and me. And someone's car alarm went off in the parking lot. 7 people went to see if it was their car. I was preaching to one person. There's no point going on at that point, you know? And then how do you pick it back up when they all finally come back in and they're all talking about whose car it was and what was outside and all of that? I'm sure Jesus stopped preaching. Maybe that's why they didn't record anything about the sermon. It's because he never finished it. I don't know. But then I wonder, did they take ropes up with them? Did they come prepared? I mean, they were men. Did they come prepared? Did they have ropes with them? You know? Some of you are laughing. You're thinking I'm implying something that I didn't actually say. And we have men in the room, and they're laughing too. Would you guys have taken stuff with you? Yeah, sure, yeah. You would have thought, yeah, we might need some rope or some duct tape so we can lower him down, right? Duct tape does everything. Oh, they could have used their belt. Some people said that if it was Peter's house, he would have had fishing rope and fishing net and stuff like that. So there are practical realists in the room. I just like to ask questions and never really answer them. And so they let him down, and when Jesus saw their faith. Are these guys important to the story? Yes. Yes. Why? Exactly. It wasn't the paralytic's faith. We don't even know if he wanted to go. We don't know if they just grabbed him and took him, and he went kicking and screaming. Oh, wait, he couldn't kick, so. He went screaming. He went, no. Because I'm thinking, if I'm the paralytic, I don't like people. I have a hard time accepting help. And so I'm not sure that I would have wanted them to take me. And this summer, I was at going to a bluegrass concert with my husband, a Christian bluegrass concert with, oh no, actually that wasn't the week it was bluegrass. Anyway, it was Southern Gospel Music, Gold City, I think, was doing a free concert. And we went to see them, and I got out of the car and went to get the blanket out of the trunk. It was at a park. And immediately, my husband had backed into a nest of yellow jackets. And the little tiny ones. And they followed me. As I noticed that they were there and I ran away from the car, they followed me. I had on a dress, and they got up underneath the dress and got stuck right where the waistband was. By the time that it was all said and done, and I'm sure it didn't take long, it felt like forever, I had more than 24 yellow jacket stings. I am not kidding. I walked to the bathroom. I've got stings on my eyelid, so my eye is swelling shut. I've got them on my head, on my hands from brushing away, and all around my waist. I want to get to a bathroom and get paper towels with some cold water to try to, do something. My husband is frantic. He doesn't know what to do. This lady comes up to me and she says, "Hey, don't I know you?" And I'm thinking, I hope not. And she said, "I know you. You work for the conference." And I'm thinking, great, now I need to look conference-ish. And I've got all these yellow jacket stings, and, you're supposed to be all dignified and, all that kind of stuff when you're from the conference. And then this other lady, her friend, walks up and she goes, "Hey, I know you. Didn't you preach at my church?" Well, that's a possibility. But excuse me right now, I said to them, I'm really sorry for being a little distracted, but I have about 24 yellow jacket stings. And so I'm a little distracted right now. And they went, "Oh, my friend got stung by yellow jackets and died within 2 hours. Oh, well, my friend, it was only half an hour and they had to take her to the hospital." And they just kept going on all about all these stories. And so my husband didn't know what to do. He said, "I'm going to take her and get her some help. So thank you." And he took me away. And we found this guy directing traffic, and we asked if there was first aid. And he said, "My wife has gotten stung by yellow jackets." And they go, "Oh, yeah, that happens every week." "No, we don't have first aid." And so we get down to where the concert is. And yes, I stayed for the whole concert. And Tim went up to the concession stand to see if they had a bee sting kit. I don't know why he didn't ask for ice, but this man heard him. This man comes over to me and says, "Are you the one that got stung by all the yellow jackets?" My eye is swelling shut. "Yes, I am." And he said, "Oh, you need some ice? I'm sure that these people have ice in their containers. I will go around and ask people if they have ice." I was mortified. These two ladies that had recognized me, they come running. They've got people that they know, that they've told. They are all going to their car trying to get first aid kits and all. I don't like that kind of attention. I want everybody to leave me alone in my pain, If I was this paralytic, I'd be saying, "No, thank you, just leave me right here." And then when they get him up and they can't get in the air, and then they're going to take him through the roof, can you imagine? How did they get him up on the roof? And he's going, "This is just too much, I'll be fine." And when they drop him down through, what is he thinking, But they were that persistent. Why? And who are they? Let's turn over to John chapter 4 to discover a little bit about that kind of person. Who it takes to carry a paralytic on a mat and do whatever it takes and not to give up. You know this story too. "Therefore, when the Lord knew that the Pharisees had heard that Jesus made and baptized more disciples than John, though Jesus himself did not baptize but his disciples, he left Judea and departed again to Galilee. But he needed to go through Samaria." He needed. And the only thing we see him doing in Samaria is talking to this lady, and then what happens after this story. And so the reason he's going to Samaria is because of her. Now, Jews would travel 3 days out of their way so they could avoid going through Samaria, because to go through Samaria would make them unclean, and then they couldn't go into the temple. But Jesus, he doesn't care about being clean or not clean. He cares about her heart. And so he's willing to go through Samaria. Notice that the language there doesn't say that he should, or that he could, or that he wanted to. It says that he needed to go through Samaria. He needed to go there. Because, see, it's his love that compelled him. Compelled is a strong word, but it's his love that compelled him to go and do something that any good, respecting Jew would not do. But it drove him there. So he came to the city of Samaria, which is called Sychar, near the plot of ground that Jacob gave to his son Joseph. And it was, jump down a little bit, it was about the 6th hour. Now, they counted time a little bit different than us. They would start counting time at the beginning of the day when the sun rose. And so it's 6 hours, so it's 6 hours after sunrise, which makes it about the middle of the day. Okay, so it's about lunchtime. And a woman of Samaria came to draw water. Now I think about her coming. Now, if you've heard the story before, you would understand that most women would go first thing in the morning before it got too hot and before they started their daily chores to get water, because they would need water throughout the day and because it wouldn't be as hot. And the well was a social gathering. This is where you would talk, where you would share things, you would share the news. They didn't need newspapers back then because this is where it happened. People would talk, and what happens way too often when a lot of women get together? And what do they do when someone walks nearby whom none of them like? Or that they don't think a lot of? And so she doesn't go first thing in the morning because she is that woman. As you read her story, you see that she has a story that would have had people in the town talking. Men might want to be near her, but the women do not. They do not like her. They think all kinds of awful things about her and talk about her. And so she avoids them. She is a woman. She is created to need love and belonging and connection. And it's something that we as women can offer in a way that men can't. Because when God created us as women, He created us to be reflections of His side of His character that is nurturing and encouraging and giving and kind. And so we can love in ways that men can't. Of course, they can love in ways that we can't, because God created them to be protectors and to be fierce and to provide and to take care of the people that they love in a way that's different than how we take care of the people that we love. Because when we love somebody, we're more likely to send a note or to share food. My family is from the hills of eastern Tennessee, hillbillies. Have you ever watched the Beverly Hillbillies? My family is the hillbilly part without the Beverly. It's before they struck it rich and got the mansion. I am not kidding you. The house is still there in the foothills of the Smokies. Somebody still lives in it, where my grandmother and all 5 of her sisters were born, where my mom and her sister were born, where we would go, and they didn't have indoor plumbing until 1984. They had an outhouse, and they had one of those pump cisterns on the back porch. I loved drinking the water out of the cistern, did not like the outhouse. I really believe that they told us that there were monsters that would grab us from underneath. Now I know that when you go down there, the way that they love you is to feed you. My great-granny, a little spitfire of a woman, when us kids would come from the north, we weren't hillbillies, we were the northern great-grandchildren. She figured we wouldn't eat biscuits and gravy if it was just plain biscuits and gravy. So my great-granny, who made these amazing biscuits that would melt in your mouth, would make chocolate gravy for us to go over those big biscuits. When I took my husband down there to visit family for the first time, I hadn't warned him what it meant to accept food from people. So when he walked into Great-Granny's house and she said, "Honey, you want a piece of pie?" He didn't know that that meant a quarter of every pie that they had in the house. And that when she said, "Y'all want a drink?" that she meant a half a liter of pop. And, my husband was Pennsylvania Dutch. Yeah. They love with food some too, but not like they do in the South. But we love in a different way, and she needed it. She needed love and connection, but she avoided the other women, the women that could have given it to her in a way that the men couldn't, and she avoided them because it hurt too much. Sometimes, when we are hurting and we are struggling and we need strength and we need our family and our friends and our faith to strengthen us, we avoid instead. Haven't you ever found that to be true? Sometimes when you need a friend the most is when you hole yourself up at home and you don't call anybody and you don't go out and you don't admit your need because you don't want people to think that you're needy. Oh, you want to help other people because we women are really great at helping other people, but we don't want people helping us because we don't want to admit that we're needy or messy because we have this idea that we need to be perfect. And it's a lie because we're not perfect. And so she intentionally avoids the women. As she's walking to the well, she sees a man sitting there. And her heart probably stops for a minute until she gets a closer look. And she realizes that it's a man sitting by the well, and men do not talk to women in public. And then she sees that it's a Jewish man. She can tell by his clothing. And she knows for sure that he won't talk to her because Jews don't talk to Samaritans. I mean, what is he doing in their country anyway in the first place? And so she figures that she can go and quietly get her water and get out of there without any conversation or engagement. And so she approaches the well to get her water, and he speaks to her. He engages her in a moment of ordinary, everyday life. I love that about Jesus. He shows up in the ordinary moments. You don't have to go to church to experience Jesus, though go to church. You don't have to go to women's retreat to experience Jesus, so go to women's retreat. Jesus will meet you right where you are. Have you had those God moments where he showed up and you're just like, whoa, wait, I'm just cleaning the house here today. And God speaks powerfully. You're just driving to work and suddenly a song comes on the radio. Or this person starts talking on the radio and he talks about something that just hits you. There have been moments where I've been cleaning house and have had music on that's driven me to my knees in prayer. God loves to just show up in the ordinary moments of life and engage us. And that's what he does. He said to her, "Give me a drink." Now, sometimes when they write this, it almost sounds like he's ordering her around a little bit, but he's not. Asking somebody for a drink was showing respect and honor. To share food, especially in this culture, was connecting. It showed honor and respect. So he's inviting her to meet a need in his life. He's inviting her to engage. And then the woman of Samaria said to him, "How is it that you, being a Jew, ask a drink from me, a Samaritan woman?" It's kind of like she's saying, "What? I can't believe you're talking to me. Do you see me here? I am a woman, a Samaritan woman. Do you know where you're at? You're in Samaria." I mean, she feels like she has to tell him. Well, for Jews have no dealings with Samaritans. You guys don't talk to us. You don't talk to us. You don't go through our country. You don't have anything to do with us, and I'm a Samaritan woman. Excuse me, hello? She never actually ever gives him a drink. He asks and invites her to engage, and what does she do? She comes up with excuses for not engaging, all the while engaging, just in a negative way. And her first excuse is, "I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough to give you a drink of water. I'm not good enough to engage with you, Jesus. Can't you see who I am? I'm a Samaritan woman." How many times has the enemy tried to convince you that you're not good enough? That you're not good enough. You don't have anything to offer. You can't strengthen your family and friends. You don't have what it takes. You don't have gifts and talents. Oh, those ladies, they do. They can sing, they can cook, they can do whatever, but I am not good enough. Or maybe you think your past discounts you. You've messed up too many times. And so when Jesus invites you to engage and to connect with him and then share him with others, you don't feel like you're good enough. I know it's one of my lies. I grew up believing that I just wasn't enough. And see, when we hear those messages growing up, the enemy knows what message we've heard. And he will do everything he can to keep repeating that same lie in our life. Haven't you noticed it? Haven't you noticed that often you hear the same thing just from different sources and in different ways? Just this summer, I was offered a job in another conference. And it was exciting, and I turned it down. And then another person offered me the same job, and I turned it down. And then the conference official person called me 3 times. I figured, maybe I better look at this. I mean, it keeps coming up. And so I said, okay, and I shared my resume. I made excuses the first time that he talked to me. Well, I don't have an education. Well, I'm old. He said, really? I said, yeah, I have kids that are 37 and 27, or 30 and 27. He says, no way. Yes, my son is 30 and my youngest son is 27. He goes, wow, you look great, and gave me a high five. Okay, well, that excuse didn't work either. I was doing the same thing as her. Well, I have a high school education, I don't have college. He goes, I'm sure we can work around that. And off went my resume, and they called all of my references. And every one of my references let me know as soon as they had referenced me. And they were all excited, and everybody kept saying, I know this is God's will. And then I was on my way to Philadelphia to film one of our ministries with our young people, one of our summer young people ministries, outreach, Pennsylvania Youth Challenge. And I got the call. I knew that they had met the day before. And so I knew what this phone call was about. And I was excited and scared. And he said, we have a policy that you have to have education. And I had told him from the beginning I didn't. And immediately the enemy got in there. See, you're not enough. You'll never be enough. The enemy likes doing that. Whatever it is that you believe about yourself, the enemy wants to repeat it to you over and over. This woman heard it every single morning when she would get up and she would see out her window all the women going to the well and knowing that she didn't belong with them, knowing that she wasn't good enough. Every day she was reminded that she wasn't enough. And that's what the enemy likes to do for us. And so when Jesus engages her, she says, no, how could you do this? I am not enough. And Jesus answered her and said to her, if you knew the gift of God and who it is that says to you, give me a drink, you would have asked him. If you knew, if you understood, if you believed, if you really got it. You see, God is showing up in front of you today, and God is offering you a drink of water, and you aren't understanding. If you just knew what it meant, but the power, the Spirit is in the room. He's present to heal, and only one person gets healed. You see, all the promises in God's Word, all of them, all those promise books that were given, the promise cards that I have for those of you who are going to be my friends, they are for you. As Gail shared, God kept promising her, I am with you. I'm always with you. And sometimes we don't understand what God is offering us, and we don't engage because we don't feel that we're enough. And Jesus is saying, if you only knew, if you just understood what I wanted to do in your life, if you understood that it was for you, it's not just for those other people. It's for you. What I have will fill all of the hurt and the woundedness and the longing and the craving of your heart and soul and spirit. I can do that for you. I have living water that will take away all your thirst. What are you hungry for? What do you desperately need? If you only knew. If you only knew. And he would have given you living water. Not he might. Not he could. He would have given you living water. And the woman said to him, Sir, you have nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. Where would you get that living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob had? Excuse number 2, my need is so great, and God's just not big enough. Now, we won't really say that out loud, will we? We'll say, oh yeah, God is big, God is big. But in our hearts we're saying, but he's not big enough for this. Because isn't that what in essence that we're saying when we say, oh no, I could never do that? What we're really saying is that God can never do it through me. Isn't that what we're really saying? When we say, well, I can never change, what we're really saying is that God can never change me. I'm too much of a mess. I'm too much whatever. She's making the same excuses that we make. I'm not good enough. And I'm too much for God. Things will never change in my life. God can never do it. And that's what she's saying. And Jesus goes on. And he promises her this living water. And finally, we get to verse 15, and she says, I want it. I don't want to thirst anymore. I don't want to have to come to this well anymore. I don't want every day to be reminded that I don't belong, that I'm not accepted, that I'm not enough. I want this living water. And then Jesus says to her, go call your husband and come here. Okay, I'll give it to you. Go call your husband. And in that moment, she is faced with great fear because she really thought that maybe he was going to do it, but no, he's not. Because when he finds out that she's with a guy that is not her husband, and how many husbands that she's had, he's going to do the same thing that everybody in town has done and reject her. Once he finds out for sure, she knew there had to be a catch. It was too good. And so the woman, she thought, well, he doesn't know me. He's from out of town. And so she says, well, I don't have a husband. And Jesus, I love how he responds, because he said, you have well said, I have no husband. Great job. Can you see the twinkle in his eye? He doesn't shame her. He doesn't condemn her. He doesn't say, well, you're lying to me. He doesn't get on her case. He goes, good one. You're right. Technically, you don't have a husband. But you've had, and now you're with, and he just loves her. Do you see that? He loves her. For you've had 5 husbands, and the one whom you now have is not your husband. In that you spoke truly. You were telling the truth. You're manipulating a little bit, but you were telling the truth. See, she had taken her brokenness to men. She avoided the women, but she went for the men, thinking that maybe one of them, if they just loved her enough, maybe it would make her feel good about herself. And don't we do that too? Aren't there things that we go to? Maybe it's not men. Maybe it is. Maybe we need for our husbands to love us a certain way, and then we'll feel like we're valuable. Maybe it's a certain size. At work, we're always talking, because, there's a lot of women that work in the office. And there's one person in particular, and she's always talking, and she's always on a diet. She's Hispanic, and her husband is now retired. He was our Spanish coordinator. And now he's retired, and she complains all the time because he's cooking dinner every day. Yeah, would you complain if your husband was cooking dinner every day? But he's cooking tortillas, and he's cooking with fat, and he's cooking bread and pasta and beans, and she's put on a little weight since he retired this summer. And she was complaining about it again. Oh, he cooks all this fattening food, and I'm putting on weight, and I need to lose weight. If only I could lose weight. And I said to her, then what? What will it gain you to be a certain size? What difference will it really make in your life? She said, well, I'll fit in all my clothes. I You can buy new clothes. I mean, we think that if we achieve a certain thing, if only my husband would love me, if only I was a certain size, if only I had the right house or the right car or the right job or enough education or whatever it is that we think is going to make us enough. And that's what she had done with men. And I don't know how her story went. I mean, I can understand her getting married and maybe her first husband dying and then another guy marrying her, but how did she go through so many? Would men really marry her, knowing that she was divorced from somebody? Would they marry her if husbands kept dying that were married to her? And the language of the Bible, in the original language, when he says that the one you're with is not your husband, I read the Bible study that said that the language infers that it's somebody else's husband. See, she'd take anybody because she was trying so hard to feel like that she belonged and that she was loved. And Jesus called her out on it. So you're trying to fill your need with other things that only the living water can fill. Well, he was a little bit too brutal for her. And so she takes it to religion. Sir, I perceive that you are a prophet. Our fathers worshipped on this mountain, and you Jews say that in Jerusalem is the place where one ought to worship. She takes it back to the rules. Because rules sometimes are easier, aren't they? They're clear cut. We know what we're supposed to do. If I just obey the rules, I'll get it right. When I first became a Seventh-day Adventist, I didn't grow up in a Christian home, and I became a Christian myself as a little girl. Didn't go to church until I was a teenager. Went to a Baptist church because they had a bus ministry. Met my husband. He was the first Adventist that I had ever met. Of course, he wasn't my husband at the time. He was this long-haired, motorcycle riding, holes in the jeans, T-shirt guy at the office where I worked. And I had decided that I was going to marry a pastor. And I was in a Baptist church at that time, and I was going to marry a pastor, and so we would get interns from the local Bible college. And how many of you are pastors' wives? Just so I can see how many people I'm going to offend. I really don't mean this in a negative way, honest, but the guys that were coming through in the interns, they were all kind of dull-looking and boring. And I just thought, well, this will be my sacrifice in life. Is to marry a boring, mediocre-looking guy so I can do ministry, because that's what I want to do. I realize that not all guys are like that. Not all pastors are. There are some really cool pastors out there. That was just my experience as an 18-year-old girl watching interns come through our Baptist church. I never intended to marry some guy who didn't eat meat, who went to the church on the wrong day, who was not a pastor and truly did not look like one. But something funny happened. When I started I'd been in a Baptist church, and when I started going to Adventist church, people started asking me questions. Now, in my Baptist church, my Sunday school teacher, Jim Ekman, his first question to me always was, so how are you and Jesus doing? Every time I saw him, how are you and God doing? What's God up to in your life? But when I started going to the Adventist church, people started saying, so what do you think about swimming on Sabbath? So are you a vegetarian or not? Are you vegan? Last week at our Faith for Family, this guy came up to me and he said, so you look like you're a pretty strong vegetarian. And I wasn't sure what that meant. I didn't know how to respond to that. He was somebody I didn't know, just randomly walked up to me. But sometimes we make it about the rules and what we do instead of about relationship.
There you go.
And Jesus got too close to her heart, and so she backed up and made it about the rules. So her excuses? Number one, that she wasn't good enough. Number two, that he didn't have what it takes. And number three, well, just tell me what rules to obey. Just tell me what to do. Don't get too close. Don't get too real. Don't get too personal. Don't change my life too much. Just tell me what to do, and I'll do it. And Jesus goes on to talk to her. Woman, which was a word that showed a lot of respect. I'm telling you, a time is coming when it won't matter where you worship. What will matter is that you worship God. That you have a relationship with God is what is going to matter. That's what's going to make the difference, not where. The rules aren't going to be important. It's who you're walking with that's going to be important. He could have argued with her. Most Jews would have. They would have said, oh, no, we're right. It's Jerusalem. But instead, he led her to God. He wanted her to have a relationship with God and knew that the Spirit would lead her in all the rest of the stuff. And she was blown away by that message because it brought her hope and courage. And she wanted to believe that it wasn't about being good enough. It was about being known by God and knowing him. But she was a little afraid. And so she says to him in verse 25, I know that Messiah is coming. She believes. She believes in God. She believes that the Messiah is coming. And she says, and when he comes, he will tell us all things. When he comes, and when he comes, I'm going to be ready. I'm going to be ready to accept whatever he says because I am waiting for him because I want this. I want it. I want to be with God. I really do. But she's not trusting him too much. And then he says to her, I who speak to you am he. He literally says, I am the I am. It's the only place in all four Gospels that Jesus reveals himself in this way, that he clearly says, I am he. I am the Messiah. I am who you're waiting for. I'm he, and I'm talking to you. I interrupted your ordinary, everyday moment to let you know that I see you. I know all about you. I know every detail of your life, good and bad, and I'm still here offering you living water. Because I love you. And it changes her life. And at this point, his disciples came and they marveled that he talked with a woman. Marveled that he talked with a woman. These disciples, Jesus was just pushing them so far out of their comfort zone. I mean, it was one thing to say, I need to go to Samaria. And they're like, Jesus, that's against the rules. You keep getting us in trouble with the church leaders. Okay, fine. We're going to Samaria, but we are not going to like it. We'll follow you. And we're not going to talk to anybody either. We're going to go with Jesus because he says that he is going, but we're not going to like it. Have you ever had a kid do that? I'm going to go with you because you force them to. One time we were taking our kids to the Rocky Mountains on vacation, and it was the summer between Joshua's junior and senior year. We knew that family vacations were going to soon be a thing of the past. He was going to go off to college while we were going to probably not get this chance, and we had gone to the Rockies on our honeymoon, and we always promised ourselves we'd take our boys back someday to hike real mountains, because they don't have real mountains in Pennsylvania, do they, Margaret? They say that they do, but they don't. And we had taken them to the Smokies, and the Smokies are amazing. Tim and I are going to go there hiking in next weekend. We head down there, and we're going to do some hiking up to LeConte and stuff, but we wanted to take them to the Rockies. Now, my youngest son is very much his father's child. He likes everything the same. Pennsylvania Dutch people are known for that. Don't change anything ever, And so our family's vacation had always been going to the Outer Banks, which is a beach just down in the Carolinas, beautiful beaches. We loved it there. We would go with the whole Horst clan, all of Tim's family, his parents, his siblings, their spouses, and their kids, and we'd rent a big house, and we'd all go there. And that's Zachary's favorite vacation, and so that's where you want to go. I just don't understand why you're making me go to the Rocky Mountains. Why don't you he complained the whole way to the airport even. Just let me stay home and work. I don't want to go to the Rocky Mountains. I don't know why we just can't go to the beach, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to go, but I'm not going to have any fun with it. We were all making lists of the things we were going to do in the Rockies. He wouldn't make anything. He wouldn't add anything to our list because he did not want to go. He went, and before we left, by the time they were halfway through the vacation, well, actually the very first night we went there, Joshua wanted to go to rodeo. They just happened to be having a rodeo in Estes Park that night. So we bought cowboy hats and went to the rodeo that night. My sons felt like that they were really true cowboys because they had cowboy hats on, and that doesn't make you a cowboy. And they felt it, and they felt like that everybody was looking at them like, look at those cowboys. They are real cowboys. It's really funny. But that's what the disciples were like. And they had just gone into town. And they wouldn't talk to anybody except what they had to barter to get food, because they had to go feed Jesus, this rebel who kept getting them in trouble. And they didn't talk to anybody. And then they come out and they find that Jesus is not only talking to somebody in Samaria, but it's a woman. I mean, it would be bad enough to talk to a Samaritan man, but a woman, you're not supposed to talk to women, period, Jesus. Why do you keep talking to them? Why do you let them come with us sometimes? You guys think things that I didn't even think of until you laugh, and then I think of it. That's funny. In the meantime, this woman goes back to the very town that the disciples have just come out of. The very people that she wants to avoid, and says to them, come and see a man who's told me everything about me and loves me anyway. And men who knew her for her reputation and knew that she was a woman, which sometimes I think that we forget. This wasn't a man coming and saying, hey, come see this guy out here. This was a woman, and a woman with a reputation. So the only thing that could be why they followed her out of town to see Jesus was they saw an incredible difference. Just like that. There had to have been something about her countenance, the way she carried herself, the way she spoke, the authority and the confidence that she spoke with, and they all went out. And by the end of the story, an entire Samaritan village comes to know Jesus as Messiah. A village the disciples had just been in and never saw the potential and never shared Jesus. But a woman, a wounded, hurting woman who felt rejected and unaccepted, who felt like she didn't belong, who hurt and was hungry for something more, experienced Jesus in such a life-transforming way that it changed her whole community. Who were the four men? What if they were four men who had at one time been on the mat themselves? What if, I don't know if it was paralysis, what if they had been the blind man and the leper and the mute? What if they had experienced being an outcast, being somebody who everybody thought had been cursed by God? What if they had experienced Jesus healing them? And they were going through town, following Jesus, hearing that he was in the house and wanted to get to him. And as they went, they saw this paralytic lying there as everybody goes on, and they stopped because they remembered what it was like to be on the mat. To have everybody rushing past you and never really seeing you, to only know that mat and have nothing else. And what if they knew, beyond a shadow of a doubt, what God had done for them, he would do for him? And if they could just get him to Jesus. And so they picked him up and carried him to Jesus. Imagine the conversation as they went. This is what Jesus to me. Did you know, one time I was blind and I couldn't see. And then Jesus came and he put some mud on and I had to go and No, my story's better. My story's better. I had leprosy. And Jesus touched me. He touched me. Nobody touches a leper, but Jesus touched me. No, wait, you don't know my story. Wait till you hear my story. And the paralytic's courage grows as they carry him and share their stories, only to be hit with that they can't get near the house, that there's too many people. And the paralytic, who is used to hopelessness, almost gives up hope again, but they don't. Why don't they? Because they know Jesus. And they know if they can just get them to Jesus, Jesus will do the rest. And so they do whatever it takes. And when Jesus saw their faith, it was their faith. I'm going to be radical, and I'm going to be relentless, and I'm going to do whatever it takes. And why? Because they had experienced him for themselves. And so if we want to strengthen our families and friends, if we want to be not ashamed of the gospel and share it, if we want to see people that we love come to know Jesus, we need to experience him first ourselves in a real and dynamic and life-changing way. And then we need to tell others about what he's done for us. You don't need to go out and have some great sermon. You just need to tell your story of what he's done for you. But first, you have to experience him for yourself. And that's sometimes where we get tripped up. You see, we probably all, if you've been coming to women's retreats for a while, or even if not, you probably have all heard, because I've done it, I've done seminars on how to have a relationship with God. And unfortunately, sometimes we turn it into a checklist. Do you know what I'm saying? Well, I really should study my Bible every day. Well, I really should pray. I should really pray more. I really don't pray enough. And I really should. And we keep using this word should. And then we get up and we have this quiet time because we've been told that we should do it first thing in the morning, right? How many of you have been told you need to do it first thing in the morning? How many of you are actually morning people? I am. I am a morning person. But I've had roommates at retreats who are not. And I've learned how to behave around people who are not morning people. Don't be perky. Don't sing Rise and Shine and give God the glory, glory. Be very quiet. So for those of you who are not morning people, and people say, well, you got to get up first thing in the morning and spend time with God, how many of you kind of groan inside? Because that's not the best time for you. How many of you have heard people say, well, you got to journal. Journaling is amazing. And they give you these blank journals, and you look at the blank journal and you go, ugh. And how many of you open God's Word and you read and you read and you don't know what you just read? But you check it off. Okay, well, I read. I don't know what that means or applies to my life today, but I read the Bible. All right, I've had my time with God. And you walk away and you haven't really experienced Him. See, the point isn't to read a certain amount of passages or to pray for a certain amount of time. The goal is to know Jesus, to experience God, to have a relationship and a connection with Him. And so when and how do you experience Him? I asked this question one time when I was doing a seminar on how to know God, and then I was doing it in a different way. I wasn't making it a checklist because I had gotten burnt out of checklists. I at one point had a checklist for my morning time that was so long and cumbersome of all the things that I'd learned at different seminars that you need to do, and I kept adding them to my time that I didn't even enjoy my time anymore. I dreaded it because I had to keep doing read a devotional book, oh well, and read this devotional book too because that one's really important, and then do this, and then pray, and then do, and I didn't even want to do it anymore. I can't even imagine how God felt about it. He was kind of like, could you pay attention to me for a change here instead of checking all these things off? Anyway, so I was doing a seminar, and I said, when do you most experience God? some people. But there was this little older lady sitting right in front of me. White hair. Sorry, again, I'm going to offend people with white hair. And she raised her hand. And so I called on her. And in that split second, I knew what she was going to tell me. She was going to say, I experience Jesus the most when I'm sitting in my rocking chair with my Bible praying for my kids and grandkids. That is not what she said. She said, I experience God the most when I'm out in my kayak on the lake. And I was like, you go, girl. Who says that we have to have this cookie cutter experience in the morning? God showed up in the middle of the day for the Samaritan woman and transformed her life. And I'm not saying don't get into God's word. I'm saying that do what works for you. If you're reading the Bible and it doesn't mean anything to you, find a different version. Find a version that you understand. Every year, it takes him longer than a year, but my husband keeps reading the Bible all the way through. He's a slow reader, and so it takes him a while. And every time he finishes, I buy him a new version. And he has some favorites now. But he says that he's learning more by reading them in new versions. I am not the type of person, because I am not disciplined enough to read the Bible from cover to cover. I have read everything in between the covers, but I can't do it from beginning to end. And personally, I love stories. And so I love taking a story and just going deep and asking questions and then applying it to my life. I love music. There are days when music is what draws me to the feet of Jesus. Well, last month I was on my spiritual retreat, and I go to this place. I take one day a month where I just hang out with God. It's actually part of my job. Pennsylvania Conference, they don't require, but they strongly encourage all conference leadership to take one day a month as a spiritual leadership day. You're not allowed to come to the office, and you're not supposed to stay home. You're supposed to go somewhere and meet with God. And so we have this beautiful gardens called Longwood Gardens, about 45 minutes from my house. I go there once a month. In fact, I went there Thursday. I switched my spiritual leadership days so I would go right before I came here so I could spend the whole day praying for you all and for what I would share. And I was there last month, and I had my earphones in listening to music, and I heard a new song that I'd never heard before. It had been a tough summer. And the song was called Beheld by Casting Crowns. And immediately I got on YouTube so I could hear it again, because you can't get Pandora to repeat. And the song just drew me to praying to God and talking to him about what I need. Sometimes it's fasting for me. Sometimes it's my one-day retreat that I'm pretty consistent with. What is it that draws you to God? Some days it's books that I'm reading that other people have experienced God. I don't like to rely on them too much. I want to know him for myself. But hearing how somebody else has experienced him often helps or leads me into getting into the Word a little bit more because I see what they said and experienced. Having godly friends. Those are all things that have helped. Spending quiet with no distractions. Just being with God. I'm an introvert. I need quiet. It's harder for me to hear him when I'm just so busy that I don't stop. And that's when I find myself getting the most depleted, is when I so fill my schedule, usually with work, that I don't have time for anything else. And so I know that what my heart needs is quiet. And so I take that time, getting into God's Word, talking to friends. What is it for you? If you want to strengthen other people, if you want to strengthen your faith or your families or your friends, if you want your kids to know Jesus through you, you need to know him. And so what will it take? When do you most experience him? What excuses are getting in the way for really letting him be everything in your life? I want you to take a moment just to contemplate that and pray I'd like you to pray together in twos or threes for each other. That throughout this weekend, that God will help you to take that time this weekend to begin with. But then to make that a part of every moment of your life, of searching and seeking him and finding strength for him so that you can be like the guys that carry the paralytic, so you can be like the Samaritan woman. And that lives can be transformed through you because of your relationship with Jesus. Okay? So can we do that? I know that it's scary and that some people want to walk out the door right now because you don't want to have to pray with anybody else. You don't have to pray out loud. Somebody in the group, please pray out loud. But I'd like for everybody to be prayed for by name. Okay? So that's all I'm asking is just pray for, make sure each person is prayed for by name, that you will experience Jesus this weekend and that you'll make it a part of